Hey folks, welcome back. So we're going to start this one with a question. What does Martin Sheen, Michael Jackson, an Olympic gold medal winning boxer, and a UFO the size of a football pitch all have in common? Well, today's guest has at least attempted to arrest all of them. So, today you're going to meet Chaz King, a great friend of Jeff's and a former colleague at Vandenberg Air Force Base. They worked together for 3 years there, where after Jeff left, Chaz took over his role, more or less. Chaz has been deployed all around the world, from Bahrain to Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan, even such a far-flung place as RAF Lakenheath, where we would later have our own UAP incursions. But one of the main points of today's discussion, and certainly one of the weirder parts of his career, was being a first-hand eyewitness to one of the incursions of the now infamous Red Square event at Vandenberg Air Force Base in America. So we had a great conversation. I've really enjoyed getting to know Chaz over a few conversations and look forward to doing a lot more in the future. And I hope you enjoy it. Let's jump in.
Welcome, Chaz King. Hello, my friend.
Going on, man?
Been a long time coming. I'm glad you're
Yes.
here, man.
Yeah, same
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So, why don't we start? Why don't you tell Tom how we know each other? Like, how did we meet?
So I was stationed with Jeff at Vandenberg Air Force Base from about 2000 till when either you left or I left shortly after each other. Can't remember. I left in like '07.
Yeah,
Um, and for the first 3 years I was there, Jeff was my direct supervisor until I kind of promoted a little bit and got to get on my own a little bit. But working for him, then developed a pretty good friendship. He actually introduced me to my wife and or soon to be ex-wife, but yeah, so he introduced me. Thanks for that.
yeah. You're welcome, dude.
But no, just you know, working together had a good relationship, taught me a lot, and then as a friend and a person, just shared a lot of memories and stories and life together, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we went through a lot together, man.
Yeah,
Out on those highways in California and everything in between, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to
So,
start with what he's like as a boss, because I think that's a bit of a harsh thing to, to jump in with.
it's,
So what
it's
made you want to be a cop?
up as long as you don't screw up. He's a good boss. You screw up and he lets you know
Yeah.
it.
I can imagine. Well,
yeah.
what made you want to go into that line of work in the first place, man? That's a good place to start, I think.
No, growing up, most of the people in my family, granddads, uncles, and things like that, were all in the military, some branch or the other. And then I used to grow up back in the day, watching the what was that California Highway Patrol chips, and I wanted to be a cop, and and all that fun stuff. And then when the opportunity came up after I got out of high school to go in the Air Force, they put on the cool videos of the security forces, pulling people over and shooting guns and the other stuff they do, throwing hand grenades and all that stuff that we didn't do a whole lot of, but the video is really cool. Kind of I signed my name to the line and got to kind of live out my dream to be a cop and in the military at the same time.
Yeah,
And
it's a pretty unique career field. Yeah.
yeah, so what are for the benefit of everybody that doesn't really understand, what's the difference between being a cop and an Air Force cop? In terms of the day-to-days and
Well, like kind of how I thought Jeff alluded to it, it's a unique career field. So it has two different entities. I guess several now, but back in the day, you had two different entities. You had a law enforcement, which is like what traditional cops do, where they on the base, and sometimes depending where you're at, if you have certain jurisdictions off base, you do a lot of traffic stops, responding to normal domestic situations, possible breaking and enterings, suicides, things like that. Just your traditional cop work, uh, stuff like that. They also had gate guards, which kind of like your entry level into that. So you were the control point to the base. And then you had your other side, which was like the security or back, even a little farther back, air base ground defense. So that was kind of like the different aspect regarding launch complexes, nuclear missiles, planes, things like that. So you had the option to kind of do both. I think probably Jeff came in before me. I think you guys were separated at the time when you came in, either law enforcement or security. I came in like 3 months after they merged, so you were kind of both. So when we were going through our training, you got trained to be law enforcement and be security. When you got to your first base, they were like, we need a security person or we need a gate guard, and you kind of went on your way that way. And if you were lucky enough, you got to, I always thought law enforcement was cooler because you wanted to be a cop. So if you got to do more of the stuff you thought you would do, which was responding to all the things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the other thing that's different is the combat role.
Oh yeah.
So our career field comes out of, military police units that were moved over from the Army Air Corps to the Air Force. And then what happened was Vietnam changed the way they had to operate, because the cops were always, from the beginning, they were required to secure like the perimeter of the air base. So 5 clicks out, 5 kilometers out. And then they had to do that in Vietnam. And they were getting destroyed out in the jungles. They weren't trained, they weren't equipped for, infantry, operations like that. So during Vietnam, I think it was right around the Tet Offensive, they started training up Air Force cops as Ranger units. They sent them to Ranger school and infantry training, and then brought them into Vietnam, and they were operating, outside the wire because the bases kept getting overrun. They just weren't able. They would run around with like 38s, fighting the Viet Cong, and it's like you need to gear these people up and get them trained. And then after Vietnam, that kind of spun down, and the combat training it was always there, but it wasn't a priority. And then when I joined in '93, it had become a new priority. So they intensified the training. We went back, like I went to Army, like basic infantry school at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And that was after the Air Force ground combat school. So they kept adding better and better training. And then, by the time 2001 rolled around, we were pretty ready to do the mission.
Yeah.
It went through different like phases where they're like, oh, we don't need ground combat, a focus on that. And then the war would start, and they're like, we need to train our guys to survive, right?
Yep. And as it evolved, the training evolved to doing the stuff we see now, going out, being attached to the Army units or the Marine unit, whatnot. So it just, like you said, constantly evolved depending on what we had to face.
So it's a pretty unique career path then, really. You kind of one foot in each world at the same time.
Yeah.
So was Vandenberg your first proper like base deployment then, Chaz?
Yeah, it was my first duty station. Yep.
Right. And like one thing that it's very hard for us civvies to understand is kind of what was it like on there? I mean, we imagine lots of LED lights and secret hangars and stuff like that, but what was it like on a day-to-day basis?
It's just like being in your own, like an own little town, especially with Vandenberg being one of the larger bases that we had. That had a little bit of everything. You had, your main cantonment area. So you had houses, you had a grocery store, we called the commissary. You had like a Walmart, which is the BX, and you had gas stations, and then, fire departments and hospitals and all the things you see in just a normal town. And then you have what the mission dictates there. So if you went further out on the base, you would have like launch facilities for some of the defense programs we had. And if you would go out even further or south on the base, you would have space launch complexes where they launched satellites and things like that. Had one of the larger taxiways or runways in correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, in the world, right, or in the hemisphere.
I think it's like the third largest, at least in the Air Force or something. It was designed for the space shuttle to land, so it's just huge.
Yep. So we had that there, and then had 35 miles of coastline. So you had the beach aspect of it. So it's very similar to what you would see in a real, like in a city, but then you have those things you talked about, the things that the civilians don't get to see, being in those launch complexes, or even at Vandenberg, some of those that used to put us back to being a nuclear base, some of those old nuclear silos that are just in the middle of nowhere. You're walking, you're like, hey, what is that hole in the ground? And it's the old launch tube for an old ICBM. So, you had some of that stuff going on there too.
And how kind of briefed were you guys on what was there and what was going on?
I mean, when you first get there, especially like as a brand new airman, you're kind of briefed on a whole lot of everything, what the mission is, what each unit there does, what the role is that you're going to play. So as far as like the Air Force aspect, you're kind of up to date on it. But depending on what rank you are or what job you had access to, higher levels of things, or, a need to know things. So it just kind of depended on the role you played.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
probably
a lot of the buildings, we had no idea what was going on in the buildings. And even when we had to respond to a building, like if there was an incident, like usually this would be like an alarm inside a building has gone off, and everything inside the building is classified, right? So we would have to respond to investigate, but we weren't allowed in the building. So we had to be escorted by a contractor or another Air Force person with clearance. And it's a strange situation. You've got your gun, you're responding to like a possible whatever. And you've got this contractor, shuffling down the hall with you. And it's like you're coming into a gunfight with me, I guess, if it turns into that. But that was the thing. We didn't know what was in the buildings, and if we did have to enter, we had to be escorted. So we had eyes on us inside the building, So
Yeah,
it's a weird situation. Everything is tightly, contained and classified.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, that was going to be my next question, because you guys would be the point of call if anything untoward were to go on, whether it's like a faulty sensor or a break-in, or worst case, the
Yeah.
book would stop with you guys.
Yep. And we also had Air Force police they had higher clearances and they were assigned to some of these buildings. So they weren't part of our unit. They were attached to like third space tracking unit or whatever. And they worked inside of those buildings and they managed the security. They made sure everybody was compliant. Yeah. So, you know,
So was
see,
it like a 24-hour a day, never sleeps environment, or was it, kind of dead at night? And paint me a picture.
I mean, it just kind of depended on the night, to be honest with you. I mean, some nights you wouldn't have a thing go on, and so you just played. I would say play. You trained. You ran exercises, scenarios, and things like that to, one, sharpen your skills, and two, beat the boredom. And then there would be nights where you would blink and you'd been there for 12 hours and you didn't even have time to breathe, eat, shower, nothing, because you had a DUI, a domestic, a couple traffic stops, a fight at the club. So you just depend on the day of the week, and then the mood of what was going on wherever you're at, depending on how your day went. So a little bit of both.
So without getting into the spicy stuff yet, then what are some of your favorite memories from being there?
You know, we had some protesters that came through. Greenpeace came through to protest, the nuclear missiles we had on our base, which we didn't have any, but they came on, and I think Jeff was pretty involved with getting Martin Sheen off the lines. Pretty nice guy, but just happened to show up at a couple protests, and then getting some of the training we got to do just from the job part of it, getting to go out there and train with Santa Barbara County, train with. I know we had the Navy SEALs come on and do some excursions on the South Base, and we got to interact with them. That was pretty fun. And then as I progressed in rank, I got to go do some jobs that I never thought I would get to do. I got to be a trainer, so I got to go to all the schools and learn how to teach people how to do, close quarters combat, and how to do ground combat, and getting pepper sprayed and tased, and teach people how to do all that. That was pretty fun from the Vandenberg aspect of it. And then, of course, some pretty wild incidents that we responded to with just things on the base, some interesting traffic stops. I think Jeff pulled over an Olympic gold medal boxer one
Oh
time.
yeah.
That
I
was
think
actually
I
pretty cool.
yeah,
And
that was wild.
yep, just
Yeah, it was sad. I had to arrest him. So I forget what Olympic he was in, but yeah, he won the gold, and his life had fallen apart when I met him, and he was hired to do some work, like cleaning work or something. And he came through the gate, and he was intoxicated, and they called me because I was the drug recognition expert. So I could do all the different types of analysis to find out like what kind of drugs they're on, and I could act as an expert witness in court. So, if there was a drug incident, I usually got called in, and we were searching him, and I pulled out this big gold medal from his pocket. And I'm like, man, where'd you get this? He's like, oh, I won that at the Olympics. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And he told me who he was. And then James Amick
yep,
heard the guy's name over the radio and was like, that's that dude. And he drove and he's like, that's him. Yeah, that guy is like an Olympic athlete.
yep.
But yeah, he had fallen on hard times, and yeah, it was sad. But that was like the only thing he had left was that gold medal.
Yeah, it was like
Man.
the one thing
That
he
was
said.
it.
I remember you saying like that's the one thing I'll never let go. So
Yeah,
So were
yeah,
you kind of relieved that you didn't have to tangle with an Olympic boxer?
yeah, yeah. He was very calm, and he was a peaceful dude, not looking
yeah.
for trouble.
And
Chaz, what's what tell us a wild incident you responded to or was involved in?
I think the wildest ones I got to play with is when I was up on the law enforcement desk and just having to be the control center. Like when the guy stole the boat from Santa Barbara Marina and crash landed on the base, and they called it in as a terrorist excursion on the base, and having to control that whole thing, talking to some rear admiral in the Coast Guard and on the phone, and having everybody from leadership breathing down your neck while you guys were all out there trying to find all these people that were trying to assault the base, and you know getting to see it from the aspect of holy crap, here I am, just a little staff sergeant talking to a rear admiral on the phone, talking to Santa Barbara Harbor Patrol and all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, it's just some guy who stole a boat and crashed it on the base and tried to
Yeah,
just get away with it. But that was probably one of the wildest ones, just because it was just a routine night. It turned into pure chaos.
yeah. That one was wild because the Coast Guard literally said we've got a terrorist attack in progress. They hit Santa Barbara. They sunk multiple vessels, stole a vessel. They're right off the coast. We think they're attempting to land, near the launch pad. So we went into full blown like ThreatCon Delta, thinking we were going to get attacked. It was just some lunatic that he had been a merchant marine, so he knew how to operate a boat, and he stole a yacht, a huge, like I don't know, 100-something-foot boat, and he just went for a joyride, and he
Yep.
crashed it right into the thing, and then he had a bicycle, so he threw his bicycle off, jumped in the water, and then we caught him, and I
Yep.
almost let him go.
Yep.
I thought I'm like I'm looking for terrorists, right? I'm like, what is this guy out here with a bicycle? I thought he was, just got lost on a trail. But then it was like, why are you soaking wet? And he's like, oh, he told me a story how he wrecked on the trail, and the more I talked to him, because I'm like, I need to get back in the game. I need to get this
Yep.
guy out of here. And then they're like, no, no, don't let him go. Hang on. And they were running his name. They're like, now we think that's the dude. And I'm like, this is the terrorist?
Yeah.
All right.
I think
Yeah.
that, and then being on the desk when I forget who did it, they pulled over Michael Jackson on the highway, and
Oh my God. Yeah.
what?
yeah, because
Yeah.
he was out down in Santa Maria, and
Yeah.
they pulled over. He wasn't driving, but he was in the car, so they pulled over the Suburban or whatever he was in, and they called in. Our routine practice was to get the identification of everybody in the car, because you never know just because I'm driving doesn't mean that Jeff's not wanted. So you'd run everybody in the vehicle, and they gave us the driver's license numbers for everybody, and I put it in our database, our GCIC system, or what was it? I'm saying Georgia now because that's the last time I did law enforcement desk. Whatever we had there, and I got a call from I was saying Santa Barbara. Like,
Yeah, it's quite a county. Yeah.
you can't celebrities, and I'm like, what are you talking about? You just ran Michael Jackson. And I was like, well, he's in the Suburban. We just pulled over on the highway. So,
Yeah. Because it's set up like that. If you just try to run random celebrity names, it gets flagged. And then you have to explain why. Because you can't just like, I want to find out Michael Jackson's plate number, right? So yeah, they monitor that. And then we worked on the Jackson trial. I forgot about that too. Were you in on that? I remember
wasn't a part of that, but I remember you guys doing it.
yeah, I didn't do much of it, but I remember Tommy did. But what happened was his ranch, Neverland Ranch, was not far from the bay. I think it was like 30, 40 minutes away. And for some reason, we ended up doing support for the trial, and we had to guard the ranch. So there was a bunch of my friends down on Neverland Ranch guarding it.
Yep.
It was just bizarre. It's like, why are we here? What is going on?
That's I was not expecting to hear that. That's another surprise, man. Yeah, I take it. What was it like? I mean, I know we're going off on a tangent, but like, what? That must have been weird.
It was weird. I just went to like I didn't go in the house or anything. I was in the front at the gates. But yeah, I mean, it's like you're in a weird amusement park.
It was creepy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Our buddy Tommy was a huge Michael Jackson fan. And and we were all like, we're not fans of Michael at the moment. And he was like, no, he didn't do any of that. And I'm like, well, we're guarding his ranch for a reason. Right.
Yep.
So yeah. And strangely enough, another Michael Jackson connection, a friend of mine was his not housekeeper. She kind of was like his administrative assistant. So she worked at the house. She ran all his like day-to-day functions. She took care of the kids, made sure that they were, at school and everything. And she had to testify in the trial. And she's on a lifelong gag order.
Wow.
She could never talk about that trial. She couldn't even tell me in private. She was afraid to tell me about it.
Wow.
Yeah. I met her in college at Santa Maria Community College. We were in the same class together because she had lost her job from Mr. Jackson.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say, he did not provide his employees with health care. And her daughter had broke her leg playing soccer. And she was trying to get like loans, like cash loans from the bank to pay for her daughter's broken leg while she was employed by Mr. Michael Jackson.
Wow.
So
And then you've had that thing today with that rapper guy who used your Congress testimony in a track called "Who Killed Michael Jackson." I'm starting.
Yeah,
if I was a cop, I'd be
dude.
taking notes by this point, guys.
Oh my God, yeah, something. What's the deal with Michael Jackson?
So I guess now that we're in the fully weird territory, like Vandenberg, Vandenberg had a reputation for some pretty strange stuff going on that you guys were involved in. So why don't we kind of dip into that a little bit?
Yeah, Chaz, I'll let you. You want to jump in about when it all began?
I mean, weird stuff happened all the time on base. Obviously, we all know about what Jeff just testified in Congress about, but I mean, we had Indian burial ground kind of weird stuff going on where people would hear drums and the fog would roll in and they would see figures in the fog. And you had, what was that? Used to be the space launch complex that burnt to the ground with the base commander and the fire chief that people would say they would see things out there at. Whatever McWilliams saw at the Solvang gate, I'll let you go into that. And then
maybe we'll skip that one. We'll let Mickey tell those stories, man.
But, you know, for me personally, the one big thing that I witnessed, you know, being the night of, you know, Jeff was the police one. He changed over with the day shift for I don't
Delta.
know, yeah, for Delta flight. He would cut early and kind of just get the brief from what happened during the day shift, so he could pass it on to us for our night shift operations, and just, you know, and then vice versa. He would do that for them the next morning, and they had the you know, the infamous Red Square up there on the north base by one of the launch facilities of the Boeing contractors, and so, you know, when Jeff came and briefed us all about it, he said, you know, it's Vandenberg, you know, all this kind of weird crap happens all the time. You know, be tonight, you know, just guys pay attention, be hyper vigilant, be, you know, alert. You know, you never know what had happened. You know, stranger things have happened. And it was one of the unique times that I wasn't on law enforcement. Being a patrolman and a BDOC controller, I had a certification that if security ever was short, they would farm us out to go, you know, be the area supervisors at some of the launch complexes. So I got stuck out at Space Launch Complex 4 as the area supervisor for the night. And so, you know, that's out on the south end of the base, right there at the ocean line. And so we go out there, you know, it's like 6 o'clock at night. We work from 6 to 6, I think. We're somewhere close to that at that time. It's been 20 years ago. But you know, we go out there. There's an entry controller who stays at the facility to make sure that everybody comes in that is authorized to come in. They have a badge or the credentials to come in. There's an external response team of 2 people that kind of patrol the outside of the space launch complex, and then there's me and my partner who patrol the inside and things like that. I remember being close to midnight or midnight chow at that point, so we all kind of congregated down at the launch or the entry control point, because that's where the microwave is at, and that's where, you know, you get out of the elements and kind of can just huddle for a short amount of time and eat your food and kind of catch up and things like that and kill the boredom. And I remember we're all in there, and the entry control point's in an elevated position, so the roadway comes up. So it's, you know, it's got its tactical advantage. You can see if anybody's coming, and it kind of overlooks the Pacific Ocean. And we're all up there, and we see a light out in the distance over the ocean, and, you know, which isn't uncommon because they have a helicopter squadron at Vandenberg that did, you know, ops over the ocean, that just did search and rescue training and things like that. So, you know, it wasn't always uncommon to see that kind of stuff. Usually you kind of knew about that, but, you know, sometimes you didn't. But, you know, so didn't think too much of it in the beginning, and then it just kept getting closer towards the entry control point or the launch complex. That kind of gets your you know, curiosity going, like, hey, we weren't briefed, there's operations going on out here, so what's going on? And as the light kind of get closer to you, the light kind of isn't able to be seen anymore. You can just see this large square object. At that point, we're all in an oh, you know, pardon my French, an oh shit moment. Is this real? Kind of, it's eerily quiet because everybody's just kind of in shock of what's going on, and it just keeps getting closer and closer and closer. And as it gets closer, you know, a square turns more rectangular because you see how massive it is, and it's just like the size of a football field, and it's just kind of hovering right there at the coastline, about 150 yards away, you know, in elevated position. And at that point, kind of all hell breaks loose. Everybody starts doing what they're trained to do. Someone calls it in on the radio that there's an object hovering over the entry control point. We spring into action. I know that we ran towards our vehicle to get in our vehicle. The external sergeant goes out of the turnstile and goes to get in their vehicle. And, you know, this whole thing's at about a minute and a half. And then all of a sudden, this large object just takes off like a shot out of a cannon and it goes north. And at that point, you freeze. You're calling in, well, it's gone. It's no longer here. And then, you know, whoever's at the control center starts asking you all the questions that you've already asked yourself a million times, but you're trying to calm down. Your adrenaline's going. You know, what color was it? How big was it? What did it have any identifying markings on it? And so, you know, trying to recall back onto it, it was a dark object. It's nighttime. I can't say a definite color. It was just dark because of where we're at. There's not a lot of lights over the ocean. The lights are kind of where we were at, so you can see people coming in. I can only describe it as square rectangular, about the size of a football field. It had no identifiable markings like our aircraft have on them, tail numbers and things like that. It had no propulsion systems. It had no lights as far as like a plane would have, so it can see where it's going. It had no marker lights like the red or green lights. It made no sound whatsoever that you would think an aircraft makes. So, helicopters have the blades that make the noise. And, when you have propulsion systems, they make that kind of noise. It made no noise. And like I said, it sat there for maybe a minute, minute and a half. And then to describe how it took off, I say shot out like a cannon because it's just how fast it left. We're not talking like Star Wars light speed, like where it blurs away, but we're talking about something I've never seen in my life in anything we have in the military that can move like that or just hover like that without making sounds and be gone 1 minute, the next minute later. And again, I know Jeff got the other aspect of it being on duty and could hear what the whole thing is going on. You're kind of caught up in the moment, focusing on what you can see. And I'm sure that he can elaborate how it sounded on the radio because all I could hear was what we were screaming at each other.
Mm. Well, before we jump onto that, then I just want to, for the benefit of clarity. So when it was out to sea, what color was the light that you could see? Was it
Like an orangish yellow.
orangish yellow? And then the closer it got, that didn't seem to be emanating from a single point on it. It was just a general.
Yep, just a general object. And that's what the heck is that? I've never seen that before in my life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so was it kind of illuminated at all when it got to the base, or did you feel like kind of the light had gone out on
Just
its way to you? Or
all you could see was the light from the post on the road, which would kind of gave it an identifiable shape. Nothing on it was glowing lit or anything like that.
wow. And what sort of time in the evening was this?
We usually went to chow between 11:30 and midnight, just because that's kind of halfway through your shift. So we
Right.
called it chow. So, but that's kind of about the time it was happening.
So it's pretty dark in terms of ambient light, and then this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, how did you feel? Obviously, you're very well trained to deal with chaos, and you're used to all of that kind of stuff. But how does that affect you as a human? You know?
You second guess a lot of things. You're terrified a little bit because, at that point I might have been in, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years and can't really describe uh, having seen that in my time. I had deployed at that point already, and I'd never seen it from another country we deployed to. I had never seen anything in the Air Force's, inventory that had anything like that. And the pure size of it alone, where would you put it? Um, then you start thinking, am I crazy? Did I really just see that? But then you've got 4 other people saying the same thing. A little, definitely terrified, like I said, because what is it? What is it doing? How is it doing what it's doing? And then to leave the way it left, in a state of shock and awe, because you can't really, until you've seen it, you can't really give it justice and describe it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if it had been a helicopter, like an aggressive helicopter, even like firing, yeah, there'd be chaos, but there wouldn't be that terror.
Nope.
They're trained to, these guys have been, deployed and they've been through some shit. So that's what I heard play out on the radio. And, I've listened to these people for years respond to real world, dangerous, life-threatening situations. And yeah, there's yelling and stuff, but it's controlled. It's not panic. They don't panic, even when things would provoke panic, right? And that was the thing. People were panicking on the radio because what was happening was weird, right? If it had been like 3 helicopters assaulting them, it wouldn't have been the same type of panic. You know, it'd be a more controlled, focused reaction.
Yeah.
Not people running around screaming, like trying to figure out in real time, like, what do we do? I don't know. Just run and get in your car, do something.
Yeah, like you said,
Yeah,
not only that, you're thinking, what do I do? Like,
yeah,
I don't even know what this is.
yeah.
Yeah. And it went off north, so it went over the base as opposed
Well, I mean,
to.
I guess like where we're at, you're on the coastline, so you're on the edge of the base, and
Yeah.
from like 4, you can kind of see up the coastline to where North Base kind of is, as far as the eye can see, and that's the general direction it went.
Yeah.
So let's jump on to you then, Jeff. So I know you guys have told this story a lot, but what was that like from your end with your responsibilities and your briefings and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It was surreal. It's playing out on the, I've already had the briefing in the morning. You know, I know these people. I've worked with these people for years. I know it's not a joke. I've looked at the paperwork, right? And then you're in that frame of mind, like we got to go out to work tonight, and there was a real UFO in broad daylight flying over the base. So the frame of mind like began there, and I was like fully, engaged. I'm like, I'm gonna go hunt UFOs. But then when it started happening, then it becomes very real. And then you're hearing these people they don't panic and they're panicking. And it's not just like them, it's calls were coming in from all over the base. People were seeing a light, moving strangely. So all this different traffic was rolling, but it happened so quick. This whole thing played out in minutes,
Hmm.
and then it's over. And then I'm up there talking to these guys, and I think there was one female there, if I'm right, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, I
And
20 years and not thinking about it, I'm pretty sure whoever was at the ECP was a female.
yeah, I think that was a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you're looking at them and they're trying to explain, like I'm asking what color, how big, and they're like, I don't know, man, like huge and weird. So they can't, like, there's nowhere to go with the investigation, right? We're supposed to gather data. I'm taking statements. They're writing basically what they experienced, and it's a version of that. We saw a light, and then a giant UFO showed up and then flew away. And it's like you're just in a state of shock. You're like, we're all looking at each other, and then I'm like, I don't know how long I was there, maybe like an hour. I'm like, okay, and then I get in my car and I drive back, and then it's all your other friends like, dude, what's going on? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then we're just talking about like what happened. And that's the thing. Psychologically, there's no way to integrate what just happened back into the real world. And that's when people ask me, like, well, what did you guys do after that? I'm like, we just went back to work.
That's all you can do.
All and talked about it.
Yep.
Like and I know I did go up to the desk and we listened to the dictaphone tapes and we listened to the radio because we recorded all of that. And I don't remember, I think I know who it was I did it with, but we were looking at security camera footage, but a lot of it isn't recorded until an alarm is tripped. So we didn't
Yep.
have anything,
Yep. It's just
you
it's
know,
since
because we used to have hours of video of mountain lions jumping over our fences and they would trip. They could jump over, it was like 15 feet. They would just boop like it was nothing. And then they would be in our restricted area and we have to tell everybody, look out, there's a mountain lion, get in your truck.
Yep.
No, you can't shoot it because somebody always wanted to try to go hunt the mountain lion. It's like, no, get it back in your truck. You're not allowed to shoot the mountain lion, right?
Yep.
So,
So
yeah,
you
there
guys
was
are
just
pretty
nothing.
accustomed to chaos anyway, but then this thing just
Yeah.
comes and smashes the whole rule book. So
Yep.
how did that? I mean, what did the day after look like for you guys? How did Because obviously you're gonna have people come in and read presumably the last night report and be like, what the hell happened? So how long did that kind of
I
meshing period go on for?
I remember when we got relieved, telling them, and they're all like, "Oh, you guys are full of crap," blah blah blah. And everybody's like the same kind of amped up. You're like, "No, man, like we're not messing with you. This happened." And then, I remember we got a briefing. It was either the next night or the next cycle we came in, and they came in and they briefed us that it was an unauthorized aircraft landing. And I don't remember it landing, and I don't remember anybody at the flight or the patrol around the flight line seeing anything land because the flight line wasn't active. It rarely was operational, and when it was, we were pretty aware it was going on, so that if something did come in, we knew it was coming in, and didn't, it's Vandenberg, so weird shit happened all the time.
Yeah. And maybe, who knows, maybe that thing flew north and landed on the flight line for a moment again, like it did a couple weeks later. And that's why they briefed that, or maybe it was
Yeah,
just a cover.
Yeah,
I don't
because
know.
an unauthorized landing is about as serious as it can get for an event on an Air Force base, surely.
Oh yeah.
So what was, but what came later was the, I'm probably galloping ahead of things here, but like how was this investigated? Was this like, probably more for you, this one, Jeff, but like, how do you send that up the chain, and what happened next?
Yeah, so what the way the process works, so we go out, we're the first line investigators, right? So anything that happens, whether it's, anything, we get there first, we gather the preliminary data, and then sometimes we'll turn it over to, our detectives or OSI or whoever, right? So we get all that information, we get the statements, we prepare a police report, and our police reports were incredibly detailed. And that was my thing. Like I used to drive these guys crazy writing these reports because I didn't want to lose cases in court. We had lost some. And it's like, no, no, we're going to get all the data, right? So we would put that together, and then that's all submitted and processed through our reports and analysis section. And then it's filed and it goes into different kind of databases and things like that. And then everything is funneled up the chain of command officially. Through we have a reporting matrix. Like for a DUI, these are the people you notify, and then we log all that, their names, who was contacted, all in the police blotter, which has all the pertinent information. Hi, baby. Can I? Thank you. She wants to be on the pod. So yeah, I mean, so every time these events happen, we did all that paperwork, and all this was like shared up the chain of command. Like everyone was briefed. And this all went to the command post, which is the central command post for the base. And then they're responsible for upchanneling it to higher headquarters. So, and me being familiar with like the notification matrices, I actually developed them before I left. I did 90 checklists, and we made a UFO one too. Me and Joe, my friend Joe, that Chaz knows. Joe
Yeah.
helped me do all that. That was a project that we did. We revamped all the checklists for every emergency and made sure they were current, up to date. And so, yeah, it's like everything was officially reported, investigated, and upchanneled. But our preliminary investigation is the only investigation I know that occurred. I am because I'm not going to be privy to what OSI did. Like they're not going to include me. They might interview me, bring me in to ask me about like what me and Chaz would have experienced that night, but we're not going to be involved in further investigation. So we don't know what they did after
Nope.
that. But we do know that NRO is operating on that base and other three-letter agencies, and what they do is data collection. So they've got to have data on these events, right? It would be incomprehensible if they did not.
Hmm.
Yep.
So, but nothing came down. Nobody said, okay, here's what, because nobody knew what to do.
Nope.
Like my boss didn't know what to do. The commander doesn't know what to do. There was nothing like rules of engagement. I mean, I think we did this. I did have a conversation. I vaguely remember. It might have been in guard mount about like, should we engage? And it's like if the use of force matrix is violated, engage. It's like, can we get the law rockets out of the armory then? They're like, no. It's like, then what are we gonna do? I'm gonna pull out my 9 millimeter and engage this thing, you know? So we didn't know, nobody knew what to do or how to respond, how to mitigate it. We were just going by the seat of our pants. They would show up and we would just run around like chickens, like we don't know what to do,
Mm. So,
you
yeah,
know?
because as a wider sequence of events, was it 2.5 weeks later that it the same craft? It certainly sounded like it when we all last spoke, that came back and actually landed on the flight line.
Oh yeah,
It,
with
it,
Grant.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could be. It could be. And that's the thing, as we talk more and more details, come out. It's like, okay, maybe that thing that landed on the flight line was a square
Yeah,
because
because
that Grant
that's
Grant drew it out. And the issue is it was so brightly illuminated, he couldn't quite see, just saw this really bright light and then the outline. But and that's the thing, like we had the red one, and then we had the orangish, whatever colored one the Chaz saw, and then the light goes out. And then the third incident, the light stays on the whole time.
mm.
And that's a super brief encounter. This thing just comes in over a few minutes and then comes in and lands and then is gone.
So
And then,
by the next one then, was there anything in place? Like, was this still active smoke room conversation or what?
yeah, pretty much. We were
Yeah, I
just
don't.
waiting for them to show up again,
Yep.
and then you would forget. And then because Vandenberg was busy,
Yeah.
it was just, we had a lot going on. And like, depending on the weather, we could have like 5 vehicle accidents, like in a space of a couple hours, or whatever.
You doing a
So you
launch
get
on?
back, yeah, and launches all the time. So we would go like fall right back into work, and you're busy, and then you're at the same time you're like looking for UFOs, and then every once in a while somebody call in a light, and then I'd start like, whoa, here we go, you
No,
know.
we'd be at law enforcement desk and people would be calling, "Are you guys launching things from?" And we're like, "No, we don't have any launches today that I'm tracking." Well,
Yeah,
something's just launched out of your base, and you're okay. Santa
yeah,
Barbara County will call sometimes and say the same thing. Are you guys active tonight? And you'd be like,
nope.
"Not
And
at all."
we've got a lot. We're getting more and more data on that from more people that saw the hearing, and
Hmm.
they're like, "Oh, dude, they're writing me emails like, I remember this night, Santa Barbara County Sheriff calling, you know, we've people reporting lights flying all over the base and down the coast, and it's like it's not us, and they're like, well, what is it? We're like, we don't know. We're looking too, you know.
So were you guys interviewed by like OSI or anything? Did you get the impression that somebody cared?
People definitely cared. Like people, it just they didn't know what to tell you to do about it. They would come out and interview people. Uh, I think I did talk to, my problem is I talk to OSI all the time, so I don't remember. It's like probably I had multiple talks with OSI about this stuff, but I don't remember. And I probably wrote multiple statements for them too. But we do remember that our friend Grant that saw the landing was definitely debriefed by OSI, and they were threatening, they were hostile, they were trying to intimidate him, and they were suggesting he think carefully about calling in UFOs.
Wow.
Yeah. And that
So
was the first time that had happened. And I think it's because it was an unannounced air, something landed on the base. That is different than something flying over. That was on the base,
Yep.
right? And the tone changed.
but it sounded like perhaps they had a bit more of a playbook for how to handle a situation like this, or am I just being paranoid?
Their playbook was scare people and tell them to shut up and not report the UFOs. That's the playbook. It was like stop reporting it.
Wow.
And they're inferring if you call in another silly light like another hoax, you might lose your gun. You're not going on your deployment. You might lose your clearance because we don't have time for jokers. And it's like, are we the ones joking? We're not joking, right? Something is going on.
Mm.
And up until that point, nobody had put that out there like, hey, don't be calling in. It was like, no, if you see a UFO, call it in. We're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And then one lands and they're like, shut up about UFOs.
Wow.
Yeah. And people did. Because there's a lot of, it's not like there was 5 events.
Yeah.
There all stuff happened not regularly. I'm not trying to say like this is all the time, but there was a wave of activity during that time frame. And it might be like two guys here saw a light, and another day like five people saw something zip over a mountain, and on and on. So it just kept happening. But these were like the most spectacular, like, oh my God moments. And the other ones were like more fleeting, like, hey, we saw a weird light, something went over the mountain.
Yep.
And those were typically at night because we were on night shift.
Yep.
So we couldn't see what the hell we were looking at. We just see the light, you know. And
Mhm.
every time it's like anything on radar, no. Any balloons, no. Any aircraft inbound, outbound, no. Right. And then these things would get logged. Viper 2 reported strange lights moving erratically, and all those blotter entries were made.
Yep.
And all of that is gone. That's the thing. Like, why is the Air Force deleting history,
Mm.
our history?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Chaz, did you speak to Arrow at all?
I spoke briefly with Ryan Graves in the very like after he testified in Congress, and the Red Skirts brought up. Then Jeff kind of re-engaged with all of us from prior conversations and remembering kind of like we're doing right now, having conversations about it. That hey, do you remember this incident happening? Do you remember that incident happening? And kind of got us all together to discuss this incident and Grant's incident because the guys that were on the law enforcement desk, we're just kind of like a pretty close group of people because we all kind of work the same together for each other or same areas, worked together for several years. So and we've all kind of somewhat stayed in touch. So it was easy to kind of track us down. But just briefly talked to Ryan Graves in the beginning. I think he talked to pretty much everybody about the same thing, and Jeff being the point, like the lead point for that, just has funneled information back to us that he's gotten from them.
Yeah. But not Arrow.
No, not Aaron. You
Yeah, not
you
Arrow.
you
Yeah.
talked to him.
Yeah.
Mm.
No,
That's
but what
that.
I did do, I provided, I wrote up synopsises of each case, and then I gave it to each guy, each witness, and they went in and like, no, that's wrong, that's wrong. And then I provided that to Arrow and the FBI. Well, maybe not the FBI too, and Congress. So
And was
they've
that
had that
under your
in,
own steam, or were
yeah,
you
I did
questioned?
that. Well, I did that in conjunction with the official investigation by Arrow. So yeah,
So there was an official investigation by Arrow that was not
yeah,
prompted by you.
no, it was prompted by me.
All
So what
right.
happened was I went to Ryan Graves. Ryan Graves put me in contact with Congress. I did a mass briefing with Congress on the events, along with other whistleblowers that are not public, as far as I know. And then after that, I gave them the documentation, and then I went to Arrow, and then they opened the investigation, and then I provided them with everything. And then later, when the FBI finally came out of the shadows, and I was dealing with the FBI before they publicly came out and said they had a secret UFO task force, which they have one that is now public, kind of. Um,
Well, it is
so
now.
yeah, I kind of got into hot water a couple times. Yeah,
It's strange then, and I'm probably over making the point, but I think that's fair. That given that you were the primary witness on one of these incursions, Chaz, you'd think, as part of Arrow's investigation, if one even took place, that they'd give you a call.
No, like I said, I did the brief conversation with Ryan, who was the one who got Jeff with them, and kind of at that point, I talked to a few people when we were out there in DC, but not in depth. So
Hmm, interesting. So, well, okay. So to wind back a bit then. So what was it like for you going through the rest of your career and stuff, knowing that you'd seen something which was tech supposedly impossible?
it makes you think long and hard about how you respond to things, what you see. Definitely doing other jobs as I advanced and went to other bases. You know, I was stationed in England for a little bit, so I got to see a lot of different things there. Wasn't there at the time of all the things they've seen with the plane watchers, but you know, just it makes you think how you respond to incidences. It makes you think, you know, who believes if you call something in, you've got to take everything credible. When someone will call something in, you got to respond to it no matter what, no matter how ridiculous you think it is, just because you never really truly know what you're walking into. But to be honest, as far as like the UFO part, you know, compartmentalizing it, you know, after leaving Vandenberg, not putting a whole lot of never having witnessed it again in my life or whatnot until it became public knowledge, and then the floodgates open. You remember it, you go back and you retrace it, you remember it, and then you know you talk about it, and then it kind of brings back those old feelings of, you know, this actually happened. It's crazy. What did we see? Can we explain it? We hear our 20 years later and we still can't explain it. And then all the things that are now happening, and they're more public knowledge because people are more willing to talk about them now than they were back then. So you're like, man, I'm not the only person, and you know what I did see was real. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Professor John Mack from Harvard, he called what you just described the skeleton key effect. He'd say that people could have completely life-changing encounters with stuff and then kind of forget about it until sometimes 20, 30 years in the future, that somebody would show them an image that reminded them of this thing, or mention a word, and it would just completely unlock the whole thing.
but it's funny you say it like that. When Jeff had reached out to Grant and a couple of the guys and was like, hey, get in touch with this person, have him get a hold of me, and kind of funnel everybody back to him. I remember when I first talked to Jeff, it'd been, you know, years, and he said, hey man, after we caught up and did all the catching up, it was, do you remember this incident? And I was in a hotel room with my family because we were going on vacation. And like you said, it was like someone unlocked the door, and my wife, you know, she was just like, what are you talking about? What the hell is going on here? Because it was just like it was all fresh in my mind again, and talking to Jeff kind of how like we're talking now, and like, no, it was this way, or oh yeah, like I remember that detail now. And she just, when I got off the phone, she was like, we've been married at that time like 18 years. What the hell are you talking about? And being like, yeah, that happened. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, man. That's why I have a lot of crazy stories, right? And not even UFO stuff. Like we talked about the boat and Michael Jackson. And, you know, you're talking about these things and people call, they're like, bullshit. This guy's making up all the, you know, he did this with Michael Jackson, blah, blah, blah. And I would go, oh, yeah. And I'd go get paperwork. We'd be at a party at my house. I'd be like, here, yeah, UFOs are real. And me and these guys don't need to make up stories, man. You know, and that was the whole thing because we, you know, we just happened, like me and these guys happened to be at the right place or the wrong place at the wrong or right time. And then we would come back with these stories, and either other cops are like, that didn't happen. And we're like, dude, go read the blotter. We had a
Yep.
wild night, you know, and they're like, oh my God, that did happen. It's like, yeah, man, we're not making it, you know, we don't have to make it up.
Nope.
Like, yeah.
So did it like trigger any interest in UFOs or anything, or was it just another kind of Michael Jackson night?
You know, I mean, for me now, we're what, almost 2 years after reconnecting over the incident. Like,
Yeah.
definitely, I read more about them. I pay attention when I see it on the TV. Pay attention when they talk about it in Congress. You know, being on Twitter or X or whatnot, and seeing all the things that develop there, and seeing other whistleblowers or other stories about what people experience. Definitely, you know, I tend to pay a lot more attention about it now, because, you know, not being the only one, and finally people willing to come out and talk about it, and, you know, having what seems to be the right people in some key places now that want to have transparency. That definitely makes it more interesting and gets my attention a lot more now.
So have you got any kind of parting advice for anybody else, perhaps that's been in your position? Because I mean, if this has all happened just on Vandenberg, you guys have got so many bases all around the world that presumably this has been happening to guys like you for a long time in a lot of different places. So sort of what would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, me personally would tell you that it's, if you saw it and it's real. I know that as a security force member, you're trained to report. So keep a hold of anything any report you write, any blotter you write, any of your old notebooks, just so you have the documentation to back up your story. Because without documentation, people tend not to believe you. Jeff has the documentation from what we're talking about. So keep the notes, be thorough, and again, don't be afraid to come forward. I mean, there's more people out there that have these type of incidents that happen to them, and people need to know about them, because without that, we can't get the right backing, and we can't get government and Congress and all them to do what they need to do, which is not only be transparent with us, but start studying it, start trying to figure out what's going on, why they're doing what they're doing. Is it a threat? Is it not a threat? Those are the things as key military members that you need to know, because we're trained, like we talked about in the beginning, we're trained against conventional things, right? We're trained to do law enforcement, we're trained to do security, we're trained to go and deploy into wartime environments. But if this is something that we're now being faced with, like you said, what's the playbook? What's the checklist? What do you do? Without knowing what we're looking at and having studies of it, we don't have a good answer for that. And we need to have those answers, and we need to be prepared as first responders to be able to do our job. So please speak up. Please be willing to tell people what you saw. And again, always have your documentation. That way you're backing up just your words with what you actually have. You have an official police report, you have it a blotter, you have your notes and things like that. It adds everything you need, the credibility and the backing to what you saw.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that's important, we've been told by the government that some people have been injured by proximity to these craft or whatever they are, right? And that's not the claim coming from the community. That's coming from the government. Those are the people. The CIA approached Gary Nolan, said we've got people that have brain injuries from close proximity to these UAP. So if that's true, and the government is not lying about that, then we need to know. People need to know, like, that's a protocol. If you see a UAP and it gets within close proximity, stay away, because you can get radioactive damage or whatever. Like right now, we're just flying in the dark. We have no idea what we're dealing with, no idea how to respond, or if it's dangerous. To nothing, and we're not allowed to talk about it.
There is a legal precedent as well, because John Burroughs, who was an American Air Force cop, he was injured during the Rendlesham incident, and
Right.
he's been paid out for being injured in the line of duty with this radiation damage. So just like you said, I mean, I'm sure you guys get briefed on not walking behind an F-15 or something like that because of the hazard rather than threat.
Right.
And here's a proof of one of your brothers in arms being injured by this stuff. So to deny its existence is a lot more serious than just it being an inert object.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Like, people like Chaz and all my other friends and all these other service members that, through no fault of their own, they just have an experience. Like, you just walk out for a cigarette, like Dylan was saying. He just went out for a smoke, and then there's a weird thing that shouldn't exist. It's real, and then it flies away. You go and you report. It's your duty. If you're active, if you're in the military and there are objects flying over the installation, You have a duty to report it, right? And then their lives are destroyed. And that's the thing. It's like secrets are fine, but at what cost, right? And why? If these things are so secret, then keep them away from us,
Yep.
right? Like keep them off of our bases. Then we won't have to report your top secret project. And then you don't have to destroy my life and threaten my family and ruin everything. Right. So this whole idea just it doesn't make sense. Right. If these are classified black projects, why do they keep showing like why are they flying over Chaz? Why are they flying over my house? Why are they flying over my other friends? Why are they flying over Langley? Why are they flying over the ships? Right? It doesn't make sense. And then you're going to punish anybody that says, yeah, there was a weird object flying over the fleet. Like, it doesn't make sense. So either they're if the story is that the government is doing this, it's our craft, our tech, then why are they behaving like that? Right?
The
And
thing
then
is,
if it's adversarial or unknown, why are they ignoring it? Either way, we have an enigma, right?
yeah.
Yeah, man. Did you ever feel like you were in danger? I know it was brief, but did you feel like you were under threat at any point, or was it more like what is going on?
I I don't think it was threat as much because I didn't know what the hell it was. It was more of what is this? What's going on? What are we looking at? What is it doing? And then it was gone. Before you could process, is this a threat? It was more of identifying what it was, and then it was gone. And then having 20 years to kind of think about it, you're like, man, I did my job. I ran out to my vehicle. I was in a semi-protective state, and I ran out to it, not knowing if it was a threat.
Yeah.
That's called after the fact, but when you're in the heat of the moment, no.
Oh, that's right, because you guys were in the building.
CP, and we, our vehicles were parked, like the external starts is parked, outside, and mine's parked behind the engine control point inside, but outside the point. So you have to run outdoors to get in your vehicle. And again, you don't even think about it. You don't second guess it. That's what you're trained to do. And looking back 20 years later, you're like, dude, I don't know what it was, but I'm trained to go out there and respond. So I didn't
Yeah.
know if it's right or not. I guess that's just what you play, how you respond, how you train, but yeah, looking back on it, was it a threat? In the heat of the moment, I don't know. I just did what I was supposed to do. But looking back on it now, you're definitely like, what, I could have walked out there and then been done,
Yeah. You deployed into the unknown, dude.
Uh,
Right?
And you weren't alone, Chaz. There was other people with you at the
yeah,
time.
yeah, there was whoever my partner was. I could have swore we've talked to a couple of people. I don't remember, I remember another guy with the same last name. We were, the Kings. And then I don't know if she wanted to talk, like who we thought was at the control point. I don't know if you guys have actually talked to her, so I don't want to say her
I
name. But
haven't, no.
yes, I
Yeah.
haven't. I know you talked to Nick, and Nick said it wasn't him, but he remembers hearing all the radio chatter about it.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
Steven or Ely or whatever, but he said no. But again, they remember hearing the radio traffic. But 20 years has gone by, and then kind of like you said, not thinking too much about it, and then here it is, just remembering that there were 5 people in total with myself, because you had the engine controller, my partner, and the 2 external people. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to find out, because we had 4th Infantry Division was attached to us.
That's
And I
right.
think it was during that time frame.
Plus,
So we had a bunch of 4th ID guys. I think at 12, I think we had a squad of them.
yep,
And they might have been out there too, because we
yep.
had them both on the gates and
And
on security.
security areas, yep.
Yeah. So yeah, man. But
Were
that's what
they
we're seeing
Air
happen
Force
now.
as well?
No, they were Army 4th Infantry Division.
They were augmenting us because we were deploying so many people. We still had a homeland or a home base mission, so they kind of like our what the IMAs, kind of like our IMA.
IMA.
They would on active duty orders from the reserve units and backfill us and be trained to do our job.
Yeah.
So you would imagine, or at least could imagine, that they would have to report it through the army as well, then.
No, 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 no. They just might be witnesses.
Yeah, they
Because
Right.
just
they were attached to us, so they were
Ah, so they're
reporting
they're
to us. Yeah.
reporting to you and following your stuff. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if there's another little leg of evidence out there somewhere. But
I
either
I
way, there's
think
still eyes on.
I think for all the investigators out there that might want to watch this, go to Santa Barbara County and the local towns in that area, Santa Maria, Lompoc police departments, and see if they have records that go back to that time frame. And because they were involved, they were calling us, we were sharing information with the different counties because they were getting calls too. There's something flying around the Central Coast. So there is data out there somewhere. People just need to get creative and think like, where would that data be? Like I've been told multiple times, and I have a vague memory that it was in the newspapers, in the local papers like the Santa Maria Times and the Lompoc Record and things like that. But I haven't been able to find anything. But a lot of it's behind paywalls and these terrible websites. You'll find an article, then you pay to get into the article, then it's not the article. You know,
well, yeah, I know you have found out through your contacts that the Air Force gets rid of things after X amount of years, under whatever rules they follow for record keeping.
yeah,
Um, and I wonder if that applies to all the, because like you said, we up channel everything through the command post to higher headquarters. I wonder if some of that stuff doesn't fall into those protocols because of the things they actually up channel being more sensitive than just to, just FOU or law enforcement stuff, because they would get calls too, actual command post on their recorded lines about people calling in the same things we're talking about right now, because that's where my wife worked. She used to tell us about the same kind of things like, hey, so and so would call in that you guys launched a rocket or whatnot. But I don't know if theirs is different because of the classification levels, they keep it longer or whatnot. But that might be, if someone's looking into it, a place to look too.
yeah, good idea. Yeah,
That's awesome. Well, hopefully we can get you guys together on a call and find a few more pieces to the puzzle.
Be great.
yeah, yeah. And that's the beautiful thing. Chaz sent me a bunch of information the other night of all these people that we used to work with, our brothers and sisters that we used to, our flight was like family. I mean, there were no outsiders on the flight. Like we spent all of our time together. We spent our Christmases together, our holidays, weddings together, and it was like the best flight I'd ever worked on in the military. We were like tight,
Yep.
and that's the beautiful thing. That's what gave me a lot of courage. I was like, if I come out and all these Air Force people that don't know me are like, this is bullshit and this guy's a liar. It's like Bravo Flight has got my back. They
Yep.
know me. I know them. Delta Flight too. I worked with Delta for a couple years. I know all those guys. They know me, you know. So, and a lot of those people are coming forward now. They're like, dude, I remember,
Yep.
and it's new information. It's like, oh, okay. So the flood is coming, man. Like a lot of these people probably won't come out, publicly, but the data is real, you know. So we're going to just keep unrolling this because what we're hoping is I suspect things like this have happened at other bases or at Vandenberg again after we all left. And people are just like us sitting there going, what happened? Because it doesn't resolve. Like you never stop wondering what happened to you. Or you just put it, like Chaz said, you put it deep in the back of your mind, you get back to life, and it's just sitting there. And then 20 years later, somebody reminds you and it comes flooding back.
Yep.
And now you're right back there again with all the uncertainty, you know.
Mm.
So
Hopefully
we
we can
want
get.
people to come out. Yeah.
Gonna
Yep.
say, hopefully we can get unlocking a few people out there and give them a team to join, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll probably cover it for this one then, guys. But Chaz, it's been great to catch up again, man, and
Yeah, it's good to see
looking
you.
forward to next time we can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm so happy that Tom got to meet you and all the other guys, and still haven't met Phoenix yet. I don't think we need.
Nah, she wasn't on the last call. I don't think.
Yeah, but we're gonna be doing more interviews like this to share with the public. You know, all these stories that I've been telling. We're gonna get the firsthand witnesses out to tell their story, and hope we can encourage more people to come out. So thank you,
Yep.
Chaz, man.
Always,
Good
man.
things are coming, dude.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, man.